Thank you so much, Bud, for coming out. I trust you're having a good RSA conference.
Yeah, it's quite busy. Yeah.
As we're winding down, as RSA conference usually is. If you could you tell me a little bit about Viakoo, the company that you started? Why did you start it, and how are you helping customers today?
Sure. So basically, observed customers having difficulty in keeping and managing their IoT systems, what we know today as IoT systems, which really begin as an application. And that's fundamentally what makes us different, is when we look at the IoT attack surface, we don't see a collection of devices. We see applications that use devices. And that's what we spotted with customers, is they were having a hard time keeping those systems up and running, and also the vulnerabilities that we saw in all of the devices that they were leveraging.
Right. Yeah.
And so, you know, that's really a differentiating view of the world. Is when you look at IoT as a big pile of devices, it gets difficult to think about how can we add value to this. How can we parse this world to add value? And we chose to parse it based on the application. So that is really fundamental to how our orientation and how we approach problems and interact with customers is on an application basis.
Okay.
After all, that's where the ROI is established, is in the outcome of the application.
Right.
It's not established in the ROI of the devices themselves.
It's really interesting. It's when I would imagine day one starting a conversation with a customer. Most customers, including myself, when I think of IoT device management, it's in the name, device management, and you're coming in saying right from the start, we're thinking about and we're talking about this the wrong way.
Yeah.
It's
application and device management.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to rewrite all my questions and make sure if I get it wrong, you can correct me. So you do have a really unique perspective into the market, and even a very unique and insightful perspective of the category. How do you see over the coming years, 5 years, 10 years, IoT application and device management changing over time and growing? What does the vision or the future look like from your perspective?
Sure. So we see this in enterprise, that the applications and the device, this tight coupling, we call them tightly coupled applications, and there are more and more individual contributor devices. You find that a lot in consumer, but we're starting to see as effectively the application is moving into the device. So the devices, there's not this software application separate from the device fleet of devices that it's using, but the applications are moving into the devices, so the devices are getting smarter and smarter.
Meaning the devices are doing some of the data processing?
Exactly.
It's like OT edge for IoT?
100%. There's growth in those. They're small computers already.
Okay.
And people are saying, hey, we can do some computation. So part of what we do in collecting up metadata is we process as much of that as possible on customer infrastructure before we pull it up to ours and do the computation there, because it's a higher cost basis for us.
So would an example of that IoT edge computation, as an example, I have a camera at my house. It'll do people detection, right? So when somebody's walking by my my front yard, it'll say, hey, there's a person. If it's a car, it's not going to trigger that. Would that be an example of the
more and more analytics built into the
device itself?
Makes them a little bit smarter.
Okay.
And so we focus on the infrastructure, right? We don't concern ourselves with the content of what the devices are actually communicating with the application.
Right.
But there are signatures that a normal conversation will happen.
That's interesting.
So when we are contributing information for like threat detection, we're giving you both ends of the conversation.
Right.
It's not, oh, here's a device, all of a sudden the bit rate just spiked.
Right.
I wonder what it means.
Right.
We know what application it's talking to, over which port. So we're able to say, oh, there's a bit rate that shot through the roof, but that's the application just made
It's really
such
interesting.
and such a request.
Okay.
And there's the signature, that looks normal.
Yeah, it's like advanced anomaly detection for the communications
Yeah.
within the devices themselves. It's
Application
incredible.
is context.
Okay. You also mentioned tightly coupled IoT devices. Could you elaborate on what you mean by
This
that?
is where there's a coupling relationship between a software application, which is what the user interacts with. The reason why they bought it was to get an outcome, a business outcome, and the devices. So there's a tight coupling between the app and the device. The devices are there to service the app. They're not there just to snap onto the network and do what they do. They're there to service an application.
Okay.
So, for instance, if we're going to upgrade a firmware or say rotate a password on 10,000 devices, rotate passwords, we have to inform the application for each device what we just changed the password to.
Okay.
So there's a tight coupling and a coordination that we do for customers so that it's not left to the humans to do it.
Okay, so maybe a bit of a challenge question. What if it's not tightly coupled? Is there...
So if it's not tightly coupled, we still have the effectively the framework in which to put the information.
Okay.
But we'll use a different way of getting at that data.
Okay.
But ultimately, once we're aware of the device, which is part of the relationship we have with Nozomi, is once we're aware of the device, since we're talking to it directly, we're picking up this rich set of high fidelity configuration and status state, state information that can then be used by the user.
Okay. How do you see, so let's say, take an example, customer, they're end user, they're interested in managing their IoT devices at scale. What are you seeing as the primary challenges for them to get started? Is it budget challenges? Is it technical challenges? Are there organizational difficulties? It's probably a mixture of, some mixture of all of the above.
All the above, yeah.
And then could you elaborate on that, and maybe how are you seeing customers overcome that?
Yeah, so it's what we see is customers are on this security journey, right? The first question they want to know is they have the first thing that happens is they have a realization. Oh, I better pay attention to this stuff.
Yeah.
So that's really
it's the aha moment.
I guess this is important. I just read an article. My CEO just said something. The board just made a decision. So the first one is just the realization. The second one is, well, how many of these things do I have? Then, okay, well, how vulnerable are they? And then which ones are the most egregious? Right?
It sounds like a similar story, or a familiar
it's a similar story.
Yeah.
And then after that, and this is kind of the good news, bad news story we get from customers, which is, they tell me, well, I get good news and bad news. The good news is I put in a discovery technology and it told me about all of these things I had no idea we even had connected to my network. And okay, well, that sounds like pretty good news. What's the bad news? Well, the bad news is I told my boss about it. And now they want to know what are we going to actually do about it to change it. And that's where the remediation part comes in. And that's the other piece of what we do, is help them change configurations, do upgrades, and take some of the basic cyber hygiene measures that you need to take in a collection of apps and devices.
To really manage them, reduce the risk at the end of the day, make it scalable.
That's right. And then do that at scale, which of course in IoT is large.
Okay. Now, last question, AI, ML, generative AI in particular right now is an exciting topic. Depending on who you ask, there's some naysayers saying this is silly. There's many others saying, hey, in the next 5 years or so, we're going to see some real big leaps and bounds. Do you see a place for AI and ML within IoT device management?
Sure. There's some of the more obvious ones like help and analysis of current state
Findings,
or whatever,
analytics,
and things like that. But I think from our perspective is that part of what we do is giving visibility to what things need attention and when they need attention.
Right.
because of it's kind of how our system works. The other piece to it is, and then taking the action on those things to bring them current or make a change to their configuration to make them more safe. And today we have humans doing that. But the basic apparatus of identifying the things that need attention and informing the user as to when to take the action,
Okay.
and then going and scheduling the action to be taken,
Right.
could really be done with some machine
Right.
learning or really AI
Okay.
or
So you're saying
AI tools.
everything from the detection side to the decision making for when remediation should take place, with a human in the loop, approval process type thing would be an opportunity.
And what that speaks to is that speed matters, right? And when you've got 100,000 things in your environment that you need to update, you want to respond as soon as possible, right? As soon as you can become aware, you need to take action, and that's where it's important to be quick, and that's what automation does. And I think that's we're going to see big efficiencies in our actual response time. It's going to get collapsed big time by getting the human out of trying to interpret everything that we're telling them, and then schedule the action, figure out when the best time to run it, et cetera.
It's exciting because, as you know, with Nozomi Networks and Viakoo and our partnership, we are very driven and really have a very similar vision in terms of not just usage of AI and ML, but enabling customers to go from initial detection to management and remediation with Viakoo. And as we often see, systems will generate lots of data, lots of insights. The next step from an initial deployment always becomes, how do we make this scalable? How do we enable end users to do what we're enabling, but in a very efficient way? So I think throughout the conversation, but especially when we talk about efficiencies through AI, not only are our technologies extremely complementary, but our visions are really well aligned. So I want to thank you for doing this interview. This was fantastic, as well as the partnership with Viakoo.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise, we really appreciate the invitation and appreciate the partnership as well. So
awesome.
Lots to happen. Lots happening and lots more to happen in the future.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, bud.
Super. Thank you.